person. And we're glad that the family is still with us, and we appreciate y'all very much. At this time, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker this morning. I'll need to read this bio. It's a very impressive one. Dr. David Smith holds a PhD in Modern American History and is Senior Lecturer American History at Baylor University in Waco. He has won awards for teaching at both Baylor and University of Missouri. Dr. Smith is also a Fleet Seminar Professor for the U.S. Naval War College, teaching in Strategy and Policy Division. His articles have appeared in the Wall Street Journal, the Weekly Standard, the Dallas Morning News, the Washington Times, Naval War College Review, just to name a few. He has spoken on the art of politics at the Cochran Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., and to civic organizations ranging from art galleries to National Society of Colonial Dames of America to the Fort Worth World Affairs Council. He is author of books Money for Art, The Price of Valor, and his newest book, A New Force at Sea, George Dewey and the Rise of the American Navy. Today, he'll be talking to us about The Hero Comes Home, military heroism in American culture. Let's welcome Dr. Smith. Thank you, sir.
I'm going to set my timer, so I'll remember to stop at some point. I don't know when. It's an honor to be here, and I mean that sincerely. This is the third time thank you. This is the third time I've been here, and every time it knocks me out with the seriousness and the reverence with which you all treat history. If everybody were like you, my job would be very easy. If everybody were like you, I wouldn't have a job, actually. And I always come here imagining that I'll be giving this insightful presentation. But by the time I stand up and start talking to you, I think, holy cow, I can't match this. The level of dedication that you show, and the level of knowledge that you have, that you feel, that you preserve within you, is absolutely humbling to me. And I thank you for that. This organization, by which I mean you all, this is the kind of thing that makes the country great. Nobody's forcing you to do this. This is something that you do out of love. And holy cats, it's so impressive. I want to talk. Excuse me. I want to talk about Audie Murphy. I want to talk about a guy named George Dewey that all of you probably know. That none of my students know, but all of you know, the hero of Manila Bay, the defeater of the Spanish fleet on May 1st, 1898, 125 years ago. The first battle of the Spanish-American War. I was sitting there thinking about Audie, and what I thought, is that mine? What I thought, George Dewey was born in 1837. He went to the U.S. He went to the Naval Academy, entered in 1854, came out in 1858, and was a junior officer in the Civil War. Saw a lot of combat. Fought on ships on the Mississippi River, on the James River, along the coast of North Carolina. And what I started to think was that George Dewey, as a junior officer, fought like Audie Murphy did. And I thought, I want to tell you a story that reminds me of Audie Murphy, of George Dewey getting his ship shot out from under him in 1863 on the Mississippi River. What was happening was Admiral Farragut was bringing a fleet of ships up, and they were trying to get up to Vicksburg, right? And they were trying to get around this really sharp bend in the river. And right there at the bend, the Confederates had installed a whole big battery of big guns. And there was 4 big gunships trying to get up and around this point and on up to Vicksburg. And the Confederates were just wailing on them. And Dewey was, how old was he at this time? He was about 25. He was on a ship called the Mississippi. And it ran aground and was just absolutely pummeled by the Confederate guns to the point where it caught on fire and it was gonna sink. But it had run aground, so it wasn't gonna sink. It was just gonna be blown to bits. They were trying to get everybody off, and George Dewey was running up and down through the ship. This is what makes me think of Audie Murphy. He was running up and down the decks of the ship looking for people who had been wounded and helping them up and pulling them up to the deck to put them on a lifeboat. And the lifeboats were going back and forth from the ship to the shore, ship to shore, ship to shore. And every time a lifeboat went to shore, it was slower in coming back. And he would bring people up to the deck and he would wonder, where are the lifeboats? And he would peer off into the darkness and he would maybe see one in the distance. And then he realized everybody's in a hurry to get off the boat. But no one was in a hurry to row back to the boat to get the other people off. Yeah. And one of the boats came up to the burning Mississippi, and he jumped down into the boat and was going to ride with it to the shore and then force it to come back. And that's what Audie Murphy would have done. He was, by the way, at this point, Dewey was the executive officer of this ship, which means he's second in command. And he got all the way to shore, got the wounded off, everybody ran, and he said, basically he had to pull a pistol and said, come back here and row back to the ship. And that reminds me of Audie. And then he realized, uh-oh, I'm second in command, and I'm not on the ship anymore. And if that ship blows up now, it's going to look like I abandoned it before I should have. And if I get shot out here, it's going to look like I abandoned it. So he got back to the ship. And he and the captain were the last two people off the ship. And they headed back down the river. And that reminds me of Audie Murphy. And I thought about that right there. And I thought, why couldn't I have thought about that and put pictures of this up instead of that? So what I don't know at this point is how I'm going to get back to what I thought I was going to talk about. Because what I want to talk about, well, what I thought I wanted to talk about, was the way in which Audie's celebrity and Dewey's celebrity were very much alike. They were, and I've got to point and say, advance the slide. So, what's next? There's that. Do it again. That's okay. 19. Okay, so Dewey died before Audie was even born. Excuse me. I think George Dewey was the type of officer that Audie Murphy would have become if Audie Murphy had stayed in the service. You know, Dewey was a career Navy man, and he served on a lot of ships, and he was always interested in the United States having the best and the most advanced technological weaponry that the country could have. And by the time Audie came along, the United States pretty much did, but Dewey had to fight and complain and push complaints up the chain of command until he went up the chain of command. Until finally, later in his life, the country began to sort of catch up militarily with what it wanted to do in the world. And by the time that Dewey became famous in 1898, the United States had some pretty good ships, sort of the core of the force, and Audie wasn't in the Navy, but the core of the United States military establishment that Audie would come into. Go ahead and go forward. This, of course, is where Audie fought from 43 to 45 in the 3rd Infantry Division. You know all this, right? The 3rd Infantry Division was under fire and in combat more than any other division in the Army in the ETO. It fought from Africa to Sicily to Italy and into the south of France and then all the way into Germany. And Audie was there the whole time. Go ahead and go forward. This is where Dewey gained his fame. Click one more time. He was the commander of the East Asia Squadron of the U.S. Navy. And basically he sailed from Hong Kong to Manila Bay and defeated the Spanish in Manila Bay. And then he occupied Manila Bay for over a year while the McKinley administration tried to figure out what it wanted to do. Go ahead and go forward. And again. I learned today that this picture was taken in Greenville. I didn't know that. One of you told me, and now I know. He came to the United States, back to the U.S. in June of 45. He was 20, or at least I'm saying he was 20. Who knows how old he was? But he was that old. Click it one more time. Dewey came back in September of 1899. He was 61. And the interesting point is that Dewey's celebrity, when he came back, was much more than Audie's when Audie got back. All right? Dewey, click it. Dewey, again, just click it 3 times. The effect is impressive. Dewey came back to a country that had known who he was for a year and was ravenous for his return. And when he, again, and again, they built this for George Dewey in New York City. This is a triumphant arch in the style of the Romans. This is in Madison Park. And there was an enormous parade from like 151st Street all the way down to this, which is like 25th Street. And they built this Goliath arch out of wood and plaster. It was supposed to look like stone. And it sort of does until it starts to rot. And then it looks really bad. If you were standing right here, look, this is 5th Avenue right here. And this parade went on for hours. And Dewey stood right here and watched it go by all day. And a children's choir would stop in front of him and sing to him, and he'd start crying, and then it would move on, and then somebody else would come and sing, and he'd start crying again. The only part of all of these things, these columns are gone, this was taken down in 1901, the only monument that's still here, see that? It's a column right there, that's still there, and that is honoring General Worth, for whom Fort Worth is named. He was a hero from the Mexican-American War. What's next? Oh, that's a good... Can you... See, the thing is, a country that does this for a returning hero wants heroism in its life desperately. I think I'm going to say that again. A country that does this for a returning hero wants heroism in its life very much. I like that. Every time I speak to a group like this, you sort of hear what I say at the same time I do. Or I sort of hear it at the same time you do. And every once in a while, I'll say something and think, I want to keep that because that's actually pretty good.
Your next book.
There you go. The country that wants a hero. Why? I'm not going to sit here and wait for you to answer me. It's rhetorical, but I'm sort of thinking about why. Because we need it. Why? I always say that what makes a hero is someone who, for a moment, embodies a virtue. Right? Virtues are these sort of, I mean, we know what love is, and we know what honor is, and we know what duty is, but they are abstractions until we see them. And then when you see what duty is, when you see what loyalty is, then you say, aha, that's what it is. And we as humans need examples of that. And we need them badly. And now here's what I don't know. I don't know if our need as a country goes like this. You know, sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's... Our need as people, it's always at the top, right? We always need to see what love looks like. We always need to see what duty and devotion look like. It might be that at certain times, the country needs to see what these things look like more intensely than other ones. Because clearly, the country in 1899 needed this. George Dewey was not prepared for it. He was absolutely overwhelmed by the outpouring of him being at the center of attention. And he didn't really like it, and neither did Audie. Audie didn't like to be up in front of a crowd who was praising him, right? He stood there in the heat in Farmersville while 5,000 people, praised him. And he said, it's hot and I know you don't want to be here any more than I do. So thanks very much. And your husbands and your sons and your sweethearts are doing a wonderful job in Europe. Go ahead. There's Dewey with McKinley. He had been home 2 weeks and he was already meeting with McKinley. And you can't see it here, but there's a huge crowd in front of him listening to him give a talk, and they are giving Dewey a jewel-encrusted sword. They don't really do that anymore. That's kind of Charlemagne-ish. And McKinley was in awe of Dewey and always deferred to him. Very curious thing. Go ahead. Meanwhile, that is the only notice in the New York national newspaper of Audie Murphy that I could find in 1945 up until the summer. That was it. My point is that nationally, Dewey came back a much bigger hero than Audie did. But their positions are going to shift very much because more people know who Audie Murphy is today than Dewey, by far. Go ahead. That's the kind of reception Audie Murphy came home to. Right.
He was all right with it.
He was okay with it, but I mean, he's a little bit uncomfortable, and that's okay. Go ahead. That is Dewey's hometown reception. The capital of Vermont really, really turned out. And people came to Montpelier from across the state. You can see his picture there hanging on the home underneath it. Thousands of people. Go ahead and click it. There's Farmersville. It's not quite as big, but the intensity is still there. The determination to feel connected to this person who is from here, pretty close, right? He's got a historical marker in Farmersville, which I'm very, very, very happy is there. It was put up in 2008. Go ahead. Now this is what you get if you are a hero in 1900. You get Admiral Dewey pictures, you get Admiral Dewey butter boats. Medallions and medals that people buy and wear. This says the 2 most popular people on earth. Find the other one. And then on the other side of the medal, there's a little mirror, and you see your face in it. And I thought that's clever But wow, that's kind of narcissistic. Admiral Dewey and you, whoever you are the most popular people in the room. But yeah, look, a plate, fans. I'm glad we have AC instead of fans. But I'm happy to see Dewey's face on fans. Click it. He appeared in advertisements, and he had music written in his honor. Murphy wrote music. Dewey had music written about him. A lot of these were marches because marches were the kind of #1 pop music back then. Click it and see what's next. I love this. This is a tombstone in a pet cemetery in Boston. All right? This cat was named for George Dewey. He was only a cat, but he was human enough to be a great comfort in hours of loneliness and pain. Wow. That's poignant. You know, I don't know how you feel about pet cemeteries, but there's a sentence I didn't know I was going to say. But when I see something like this, we need stuff. We need affection. We need love. And Dewey the cat, born in 1898, named for Admiral George Dewey. What's next? Oh, this. This is a theater. This is the point where Dewey and Audie Murphy begin to sort of culturally overlap. Okay? Dewey's celebrity coincided with the beginning of motion pictures. Right? And these were featured. This was an amusement parlor in which were screened all day little short films, like 2 minutes, 3 minutes long. That was it. They didn't have them much longer than that. Feature film movies, they don't come along till later. But they had motion pictures, and they had motion pictures of George Dewey stepping off boats, welcoming people onto boats, going down the street waving, and people went nuts for it. And when his boat, when the Olympia, with all of its sailors, came back to New York City in September of 1899, his sailors could go to this place on 22nd Street and see themselves on the big screen. And when they came in, everybody in that place knew who they were and cheered for them. Can you go ahead and see what's next? Okay, those are two magazine covers with George Dewey on them. This one on the right is really, really impressive. When you look at it, I mean, his collar is a battle cruiser. That's pretty good. It's very good. The more you look at it, there's like no human features there. It's all other stuff. His forehead says Pacific Ocean. Hit it now. Now then, this is where Audie's celebrity begins to turn in the direction of Dewey's. When he appears on Life magazine, Audie Murphy was a huge celebrity in Greensville and McKinney and Farmersville, right? But not nationally until that. And what this reminds me of, what this makes me think of, is sort of the difference between regional celebrity and national celebrity. This is sort of the point at which North Texas sort of loses their exclusivity over Audie Murphy. Once that happens, he's out in the world, right? And this, of course, is what gets him to the attention of James Cagney, you know. And Cagney says, I think this kid would be great in the movies and coincidentally might help me bail out my failing production company. So Audie Murphy winds up in Hollywood. doing stuff like this. And this is how. Okay, let me think if I want to say it this way. I'm going to say it this way, and then I'm going to fix it. This is how Audie Murphy becomes a national celebrity. Okay, I think that's all right. Through the medium that was the dominant communication form of the day. See, I'm trying to say something generally so it can fit with Audie Murphy and fit with Dewey. You take this hero and you connect it to the dominant cultural expression of communication of the time. And that's when they blow up. And he did when he became a movie star. He didn't become a different person at all. He was the same person. He was still the hero. He was still the soldier driven by duty and honor and compassion for his fellow soldiers. But his image becomes a national thing at this point. And then everybody gets to say, that's Go ahead, see what's next. Oh, yeah. That's in San Antonio, I think, although I really don't know anything anymore. But there's a Majestic in Dallas, too. It looks like it. I think the Majestic in Dallas is dark brick.
Yeah, that's not.
Click it and see. Oh! Dewey falls from grace really fast. In part because he says, maybe I'll run for president. In 1900, from the time, this is curious too. This shows you that celebrity of a certain kind doesn't mix with celebrity of another kind. Before Dewey ever got back, all right, he was over in the Philippines for a year and a half. Before he ever got back, people were talking about him being presidential material. They didn't even know him. He had never voted in a presidential election. And they were talking about him running for president. And when he came back, his first wife had died in 1872. And when he came back, he married a wealthy Washington socialite, which really damaged his reputation with the people. And as far as I can tell, she was from a very prominent political family in Ohio. And her brother ran for governor of Ohio and was defeated. And then it seems like she picked up this Dewey for president vibe and started poking him in that direction. And finally, in April of 1900, for the election that fall, he said, okay, if they want me to be president, I'll be president. That's really sort of not the remark of an enthusiastic person. Are you a Republican or are you a Democrat? And he basically said, what do you want me to be? And then he said, I'll run for president for whatever party wants to nominate me. And this kind of stuff doesn't go over very well with serious politicians. And that was in a national magazine. And holy cow, he has fallen a long way fast. Which means celebrity is fleeting, usually. The country's fickle and can turn on you pretty quick. Go ahead. The Spanish-American War in which Dewey fought has a little bit of a different reputation than the war in which Audie Murphy fought. The Spanish-American War gets wrapped up in imperialism and annexation and colonies, and there was a very strong anti-imperialist movement, and Dewey gets associated with imperialism, and that damages his reputation. Click it again. What? Oh, I thought I heard a question. Wrap it up! Audie Murphy fought in a war, as you know, that has, I don't want to say a better reputation, but a better reputation. There's a clarity of purpose in World War II that survives even today that was lost in the Spanish-American War. Click it one more time. Audie's grave at Arlington, click it again. Dewey is in the National Cathedral. Click it one more time. In the basement of the National Cathedral. He was on the board of the National Cathedral, which is why he wrote it. The Olympia in Philadelphia is the oldest steel ship still afloat. And that was his flagship at the Battle of Manila Bay. And that is the closest thing he has to a museum. And that is it. I think of them a lot, and this is, go ahead, put it one more time. This is not just because these are my two latest books, but there's a lot of overlap between these people. And we can learn a lot about heroism by reading a poem, I shouldn't say that, by thinking about Audie Murphy and his sort of predecessor in heroic celebrity from the previous century, George Dewey. All right? I'm afraid to look at my watch.